If you watched the video from the first section or talked to any of your classmates, you've heard us talking about positive and negative numbers being called Mr. Evans numbers and Mr. Schmidt numbers. And what we really talked about is how positive numbers are weak and scrawny, a lot like Mr. Evans, where negative numbers are big and strong and powerful, a lot like Mr. Schmidt. And we referenced what happens when positive and negative numbers fight. Now, when we're working on multiplying and dividing integers, those same type of rules can apply, and I think it's a really easy way to remember how that happens. So, I like to make this chart. Now, it's important to identify in this chart the fact that positive times a positive and positive divided by a positive have the same set of rules. Now, if you remember, when a positive and another positive fight, the answer ends up being positive because they're so weak that no one can beat each other and they just kind of stay as is. But if a positive and a negative fight, in either order, the negative is stronger and will beat up the positive. So positive divided by a negative is a negative answer. A negative divided by a positive, also a negative answer. Now, the one that's hard to remember is if two negatives fight, they beat each other up, and what Dakota likes to say is a body slam. They turn into a weak and scrawny positive number. It's very important to have this chart written down so that you can go back and look at the information later, but it's a way that I like to remember how these problems work. So for a couple examples, if we have 8 times negative 7. What I like to think of this is it's actually going to be a negative answer because we have a positive times a negative. So it becomes a negative answer, and then I can basically ignore the negative for the rest of the problem. So it ends up becoming a negative and then just 8 times 7. Well, 8 times 7, or 8 groups of 7, ends up being 56. And so our answer ends up being a negative 56. Below here, we have a negative times a negative. Well, if we remember from the chart, they beat each other up and body slam into a positive. So this just becomes a positive 6 times 6, which ends up being positive 36. Okay, not the most complicated problems, but it is important to have that chart memorized and written down. Now, when we work on division problems, it ends up being the same style. So here we end up having a positive divided by a negative. So we know that this ends up being a negative 32 divided by 4. Well, we know that 32 divided by 4 is 8. Therefore, our answer will be a negative 8. Down below, if we have a negative divided by a negative, that ends up being a positive, so we can treat this just the same way we would treat 81 divided by 9. 81 divided by 9 is 9, and so our answer is a positive 9. We're going to move to a couple more complicated problems, but the style is going to remain the same. For this top problem, 312 divided by negative 13. Since this is a positive divided by a negative, our answer will be a negative number. So we're going to finish this problem with long division, but ignore the negative part until the answer. So if I have 312 divided by 13, the first thing I have to identify is how many times can I multiply 13 to get as close to 312 as possible. Well, that's going to fit into our tens place. I know that 13 times 3 is 39, so that's too big. So it has to be 2 tens that fit into this problem. Well, 20 times 13 ends up giving us 260. This might be a little bit different than people have seen it written before, but the style ends up being the same. So then 260, we end up having 2. We turn this into 11 tens here, which gives us 52. So then 13 times 4 ends up being exactly 52 with a remainder of 0. Therefore, our answer, 312 divided by 13, is not just 24. It's actually negative 24. Okay? So the style of the problem doesn't necessarily change a huge amount, but it is very important to make sure that you remember to include that negative at the end, but you can ignore it for a large majority of the problem. Same style here with 26 times 8. We know that this will be a negative answer because we have a positive times a negative. So we can do simply multiplication, 26 times 8, and we can ignore the negative until the end. Well, I know that 6 times 8 is an answer of 48. So we can put our 8 here in the ones place, and we can bring our 4 tens, or our 40, up to the tens place. 2 times 8 is 16, and 16 would be 160, would be 16 tens. So 160 plus 40 gives us 200, or 208. Now, I'm just going to double check my math real fast here to make sure I didn't make a mistake here. And so we end up getting an answer of 208, but our answer has to be negative. So negative 208. So moving to our final two problems. It's not a super long video. We're going to do two more. Now, I'm pretty sure the video is going to ask you to try to do these on your own, and then I can check as we work through them. So I'll go a little bit quicker than I have before. Negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive answer. Therefore, we can simply do our long division, and we can ignore the negatives completely in this problem. Now, if I'm looking for the largest number that 9 can multiply to get close to 38 tens, would end up being 4 tens, or 40. That would end up giving us 360. And so I can then bring down my 7, 2 tens left over. So we have 27 left over. That means that we will have 3 in the ones column, and 3 times 9 gives us 27. So we do have a remainder of 0, which means that negative 387 divided by negative 9 is equal to positive 43. For our bottom problem, it is a positive times a negative. Therefore, we are going to have a negative answer. So we end up multiplying 21 times 22, and we can ignore the negative until the very end of the problem. So in the ones column here, we're going to do 1 times 2, which gives us 2 in the ones column. We then take this 2 times this 2, but this is 2 tens. So 2 times 2 is 4 tens, or 40. So 2 times 21 is 42. Then, since we're done with this part of the problem, we can move down here. This is 20 times 21. Well, since that is in the tens column, we're going to put a 0 in the ones column. 2 times 1 is going to be 2 tens. And then 2 tens times 2 tens is actually going to be 400, or 4 100s. That might be a little bit different terminology than you're used to in the multiplication, but the process is still the same. So then we add all of our numbers together, which means that 21 times negative 22 is equal to negative 462. So that is the end of the video. If you did not score a 3 out of 4 or a 4 out of 4, make sure that you do the video retake. As always, ask me any questions if you have them.